It's strange how foreign the dangers of our world can seem to some people. When individuals imagine ancient, forgotten monsters and hostile invasions, they don't imagine these things sitting upon their front porch. But that's exactly what the people living in Aleport need to observe every day. Gather around, my friends, as today we delve into the history and dangers of a once revolutionary building turned monster den, the lighthouse known as Pharos Sirius. To understand this grand lighthouse, we need to first understand the area and island it rests upon. Pharos Sirius is located to the southwest of Aleport, a very busy and popular town belonging to Limsa. This location is a hotspot for trade and became Limsa's second most popular harbor when it was built in the year 1104 of the 6th Astral Era. Unsurprisingly, the town's largest exports are grog, beer, and, of course, ale. But the reason for this isn't simply because of pirates enjoying an alcoholic beverage. Unlike water, ale doesn't stagnate nearly as quickly when on a long voyage out at sea, which means that ale has a practical use on top of a recreational one. That is how the town of Aleport became the second busiest harbor in the entire nation of Limsa. However, being a busy harbor means that ships need to be able to sail and navigate safely to it, and Western Lenosia is famed for having jagged rocks and reefs resting just below the water's surface. This brings us to the tiny islands resting off of Aleport's southwest coast. This collection of tiny islands are called the Isles of Umbra, and they have quite the history. Many ships have been damaged by sailing too closely to them, but it's not just the underwater rocks that intimidates people. There are powerful ocean currents around the south side of Vilbrand that are known to carry the wreckage of ruined and sunk ships to the Isles of Umbra, thus creating what everyone calls the ship graveyard. It's not uncommon to see the hulls of ruined ships resting here, but as the locals have told me, for every ship you see above the waters, there's a score of vessels that you aren't seeing beneath the surface. Of course, such powerful currents and hazardous reefs would eventually lead to the creation of, you guessed it, a lighthouse. Something to safely guide ships away from danger and into the comforts of Aleport's harbor. It took some time, but Pharos Sirius would be built by the Lominsan company called Naldic and Vimeles, though this business is more commonly known for its connections to the blacksmithing and armorer guilds. The lighthouse was stationed upon the largest landmass in the Isles of Umbra, and would become not only a beacon for Aleport, but a sign of Limsa's progress as a society. You see, Pharos Sirius wasn't just another lighthouse, it was a marvel of magic and technology. If ever you wondered why this place has such intricate machinery, there's a good reason. The way this building worked is that the interior mechanism would draw upon the aether of the land and gently funnel it up through the tower, eventually leading to a massive crystal at the top of the lighthouse, which would be illuminated. Now, anyone who has seen my previous lessons on magic might already be asking, if the lighthouse was drawing upon the land's aether, wasn't that dangerous? Normally you would be correct, but the true answer is surprisingly no. The ones who engineered the lighthouse did so knowing the importance of ambient aether, so after the ethereal energy was funneled up to the crystal to illuminate it, the aether would keep going, simply passing through the crystal and releasing itself back out into the area surrounding Western Lenosia. Pharos Sirius was quite literally a lighthouse of perfectly recycling energy. The success of this building meant quite a lot for the guilds and country of Limsa. And yet, the rather massive crystals jutting out the sides of the lighthouse means there's more to this story. Much more. Unfortunately, the lighthouse would be ruined by no fault of the engineers or the people of Limsa. It was simply one of the many random targets of Bahamut's rampage during the 7th Umbral Calamity. As the Elder Primal raged, this lighthouse was in a fully functioning state. So, when one of Bahamut's attacks collided with the building, all of the aether that was traveling up the lighthouse was released at once. But instead of exploding, a strange reaction happened where the pure aether of the land was mixed with Bahamut's power. The released energy crystallized all at once, creating these brightly colored and extremely volatile corrupted crystals. This is why the lighthouse looks as though its demise was suspended in time. Aleport would mourn the loss of such a valuable and revolutionary building. The only consolation was that the massive corrupted crystals sticking out of the structure would glow at night, meaning that the lighthouse was still technically able to perform its duties despite the mechanical death on the inside. Eventually, the business of Naldic and Vimeles would try to send people inside to investigate the damage done to Pharos Sirius. Even though the lighthouse didn't explode or crumble, didn't suddenly mean it was safe. They needed to not only make an account of how bad the damage was, but see if the structure's integrity was truly compromised. At first, they began their investigation as normal, but things only became more and more strange. They noted how the corrupted crystals were doing unnatural things to anything in its immediate area. Not only that, wild animals were starting to roost inside the abandoned building. Yet all of this would pale in comparison to their most shocking discovery. The thing that would make all the engineers flee Pharos Sirius was the realization that a siren had made its home here. Now, sirens weren't a mystery to the people of Limsa. In fact, they were considered a danger to everyone once upon a time. However, the pirate king known as Mistbeard started a campaign to slay all of the sirens with great violence a long time ago. Since then, no one had seen or heard of any sirens until now. Between the corrupted crystals, roosting monsters, and now the reemergence of a siren, Naldic and Vimeles would cut their losses, knowing that they now needed the help of adventurers to clear out the lighthouse. Eventually, members of the Adventurers Guild would be found and briefed about the state and hazards inside Pharos Sirius. But the life of an adventurer is almost always one of peril, so these brave souls took up the task regardless. Yet what they discovered after entering the Isles of Umbra was that the corrupted crystals around the lighthouse were much more strange than they initially thought. It turns out that the corrupted aether of those crystals was able to stimulate magic akin to necromancy, bringing long-dead sailors back to life. Yet these individuals were more like soulless puppets, with only the impression of the person they once were echoing throughout the corrupted crystals. But it wasn't just necromancy they discovered, as the crystals proved to be explosively unstable. However, this did not deter them. As they moved up the towering lighthouse, they would see the extent of the damage to this place and why everyone was afraid what might happen if certain precautions weren't taken. And the higher they climbed the lighthouse, the more they could hear a dangerous and bewitching melody. It took some additional fighting, but they were able to clear out some of the monsters and beasts that had started to roost within the lighthouse. After that, the adventurers were able to reach the top, and they came upon the lair of the reclusive siren. But just like the Pirate King Mistbeard, this monster stood little chance against the adventurers who challenged it. With its defeat, Aleport and its engineers breathed a sigh of relief. Hopefully, given time, they'd be able to find a way to chip at the corrupted crystals and save Pharos Sirius. As time moved forward, they worked hard to try and make as much progress as they could. But eventually, the workers would get a slew of uninvited guests in the form of aggressive kobolds. It turns out that some of the kobolds from Ogamoro were planning a sort of subterranean invasion of Limsa territory. But they drastically miscalculated. Instead of digging toward their intended target, they ended up beneath the Isles of Umbra, directly beneath Pharos Sirius. Once again, the workers of Naldic and Vimeles were chased out and petitioned for aid. But since this was a formal invasion, the Maelstrom was notified immediately. Through them, they were able to get a hold of the same adventurers that were at the lighthouse before. Their knowledge of Pharos Sirius and its dangers made for the ideal forward party to retake the lighthouse and push back the initial Kobold invasion. This tactic would prove to be the best choice, as the adventurers would enter the lighthouse from the roof and slowly make their way downward, eventually discovering the tunnels these belligerent beastmen had carved. Like the siren before them, the kobolds didn't stand a chance against these adventurers, and they were scattered. After the adventurers had dealt a decisive blow, the maelstrom swiftly moved in behind them, securing Pharos Sirius and ensuring the kobolds' invasion was an utter failure. With the siren dead and surprise kobolds removed, the Pharos Sirius lighthouse is back to standing watch over Aleport. Time will tell if the workers belonging to Naldic and Vimeles will be able to save it, but until then, the eerie glow of the corrupted crystals will continue to shine in the night sky, allowing the lighthouse to perform its duties even after feeling the wrath of an Elder Primal. So if you ever find yourself in Aleport, don't forget to ask the locals how the lighthouse is doing, and toast a drink to the continued vigilance of Pharos Sirius. Stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Sage Mouse, Sinalf Bagel, Cezanne, and Tyradox, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.